Was Nietzsche an antinatalist? To answer this question, we need to state what antinatalism is. That is the belief that bringing new life into the world, predominantly children, is immoral, as opposed to being moral. This is because of the suffering that it will experience throughout its life and weighs the pleasure that the individual will experience in his or her lifetime. David Bennett, a modern-day philosopher who promoted for the resurgence of the philosophy in his book Better Never to Have Been, states that it would be better to not exist and that procreation is always wrong. He argues that there is an asymmetry between pleasure and pain for someone who does not exist, and this asymmetry implies that it is worse for a new life to come into existence than for it to not come into existence. In the asymmetry of pleasure and pain, he brings about 4 premises and 2 scenarios. Scenario 1 represents the existence of an individual. He states in his first premise that the presence of pain is bad for someone that exists, and in his second premise, the presence of pleasure is good for someone that exists. His second scenario is that of someone who never ends up existing. For the first premise, he states that the absence of pain is good, and for the second premise, that the absence of pleasure is not bad, therefore representing an asymmetry in the second scenario of non-existence. Since pain and pleasure are both absent for the non-existent, he concludes that non-existence is overall good. This therefore gives never-existence an advantage over existence, making it immoral. A good quote from the book that highlights the differences of the non-existent and the existent is their experiences of pain and pleasure. In this he quotes, "The absence of bad things, such as pain, is good even if there is nobody to enjoy that good, whereas the absence of good things, such as pleasure, is bad only if there is somebody who is deprived of these good things." End quote. He even claims in an interview with Cosmic Skeptic that if you didn't use the axiological asymmetry within his argument for antinatalism, it would still stand simply due to the amount of suffering that is experienced in existence itself. With that basic run-through of the antinatalist argument, I will go on to what Nietzsche's view would have been. In regards to my critique of the philosophy itself, that will be in another video. I believe the fundamental principle in demonstrating that Nietzsche did not agree with the antinatalist argument is that of Nietzsche's Dionysian Affirmation for life, which he carried agreement with throughout most or if not all of his life. Let's start with the Nietzschean Affirmation or Dionysian Affirmation. This is that of the complete affirmation with the totality of being. This is the agreement in the bad and negative aspects of being are used as a cause for rejection, but still part of life that represents the true good and beauty of nature, with that being the will to life itself. From Twilight of the Idols, Nietzsche says, I quote, "The saying yes to life even in its strangest and hardest times, the will to life, that is what I call Dionysian. When it comes to accepting this way of life and adopting it, it is not possible for all or even many. Thus Nietzsche called this state of being the great health, in which both the highest peaks of life and the lowest of lows are submerged or joined together and agreed upon with an all-encompassing yes. Ones who fall into this acceptance and in a linear fashion only peak at the components of being that represent the eternal abyss of life are those who Zarathustra cites the preachers of death. As I quote, "Whensoever they meet with a sick man or a old man or a corpse, they say, 'Life hath been refuted.'" End quote. In Twilight of the Idols, he says of those that preach world-weariness, I quote, "They negate life, they slander it, hence they are my antipodes." End quote. In Twilight of the Idols, Nietzsche explained the feeling of sacredness that the ancient Greeks felt towards the pain which precedes birth and creation. I quote, "From the Greeks a sexual symbol was therefore the most sacred symbol. Every single element in the act of procreation, of pregnancy and of birth aroused the highest and most solemn feelings. In the doctrine of the mysteries, pain is pronounced holy. The pangs of the woman giving birth consecrate all pain, and conversely all becoming and growing. All that guarantees a future involves pain, that there may be the eternal joy of creating, that the will to life may eternally affirm itself. The agony of the woman giving birth must also be there eternally. All this is meant by the word Dionysus." End quote. So what can be taken from this? To Nietzsche, Dionysus was a figure for the justification of all pain and suffering. To him, this would have been a strong antidote to his own personal suffering, but also on a universal scale, in the understanding of pain, so therefore if pain and suffering are in itself part of the archaic essence of all things, and that to remove them would be the total removal of all life and its beauties, does this answer the question in Nietzsche's view that it is fundamentally immoral to bring new life into the world? I believe in part yes. If Nietzsche believed in position, he would not form a thought that brings a strength of will into the pessimistic world view, with also the use of a Dionysian affirmation for life, which by the way opposes the view of Schopenhauer's negation of the will. He therefore must have seen the positive value in life, to a degree that did not cause him to follow the opinion that it would be intrinsically immoral to reproduce its existence. You can say that Nietzsche had developed a form of pessimism that opposed Schopenhauer's pessimism, being the negation of the will to live, or will to life. Nietzsche developed what you could call a pessimism for strength, while Schopenhauer developed a pessimism for weakness. Walter Kaufmann wrote that Nietzsche, I quote, celebrates the Greeks who, facing up to the terrors of nature and history, did not seek refuge in a Buddhistic negation of the will, as Schopenhauer did, but instead created tragedies in which life is affirmed as beautiful in spite of everything. End quote. Schopenhauer's negation of the will was a saying no to life, which he judged to be a scene of pain and evil, directly against Schopenhauer's place as the ultimate naysayer to life. Nietzsche positioned himself as the ultimate yes-sayer. Nietzsche's affirmation of life, of life's pain and evil, in opposition to Schopenhauer, resulted from an overflow of life. As I quote from Nietzsche's book called On the Genealogy of Morality, I was the first to see the actual contrast, the degenerate instinct which turns upon life with a subterranean lust of vengeance, Christianity, Schopenhauer's philosophy, and in some aspects to even Plato's philosophy. In short, the whole of idealism in its typical forms, as opposed to a formula of the highest year-saying to life, born of an abundance and superabundance of life, a year-saying free from all reserve, applying even to suffering and guilt, and all that is questionable and strange in existence." End quote. Schopenhauer's advocacy of self-denial and negation of life was, according to Nietzsche, very harmful. For his entire mature life, Nietzsche was concerned with the damage that he thought resulted from Schopenhauer's disgust with life and turning against the world, and how it would influence others. Nietzsche and Schopenhauer can properly be called pessimists. Both believed that life is fundamentally painful and cruel. Schopenhauer's pessimism for weakness is not exactly symmetrically comparable to antinatalism, but something that it does lack, I think, is a defense system against its argument. Can someone who follows through with the belief of the negation of the will to life in Schopenhauer's view hold a good argument to justify bringing children into existence? I don't think so. The act of procreation, or at least intercourse, is an outcome of the will to live, as it is instinctive. Nietzsche doesn't take this view. Therefore his pessimism for strength affirms pain and cruelty in life with the proclamation that all that which encompasses life is good. Nevertheless, we should not get confused with the fact that Nietzsche would agree with most of what antinatalists have to say with what life is like in descriptive terms. But from what I understand, he would not agree with the antinatalist conclusion. Why exactly? Because the fundamental principle that differentiates the antinatalist from Nietzsche is the moral valuation of life, with that for Nietzsche's affirmation of life. Fundamental element being within Nietzsche's philosophy, I do not think he can be granted as an antinatalist. I also did some research on what might have been his thoughts on children, but I couldn't find anything substantial. With that said, if you think I am at all wrong and that you have a valid counter-argument, or that I missed something out, tell me in the comments below. I am sure a discussion or debate can be made out of it with the people that view this video and myself. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like below and subscribe for more content on philosophy and psychology. Thanks for watching.